The Matrix Resurrections is finally hitting theaters this week. I never thought we would ever get another Matrix film, especially with the likes of Neo and Trinity coming into the likes, but today it is finally out and it's time to dive in and rank all 4 Matrix films from worst to best. I could have included the Animatrix, but I did not have time to rewatch it before doing this ranking as well. I just wanted to really touch on the live action films because I feel like there is such a wide vast of opinions when it comes down to not just the first film. The first film, a lot of people wholly praise, but the last 3, the new one, so the second one, and the third one, I feel like there is so much divide at times on those movies. So I think it's going to be fun to see your guys' reaction and in general your ranking as well to those movies. So make sure to leave that as a comment down below, as well as hit that like and subscribe button so we can keep talking movies over here on a daily basis. But without further ado, it's time to dive in to The Matrix. Coming down at my number 4 is The Matrix Revolutions. Now, honestly, growing up, I did not like this movie. I always just found it boring and kind of a mess. And rewatching it today, it's still kind of a mess, but I can enjoy it for more of what it is. A lot of these Matrix movies, especially the original trilogy, is so different than so many of the different blockbusters that we get nowadays, whether it's from the action, the score, the editing, or just in general, the design of all these set pieces. They are so vastly different, and all of this still feels like an early 90s or late 90s blockbuster, even though these did come out like 1999 into the 2003. But for me, they work for that, and I find as messy as 3 can be, the action is one of the big standouts of it and make it to be such an entertaining thrill ride throughout the entire thing. Even if it is kind of anticlimactic at certain points, the Neo versus Agent Smith fight scene is one of the best in the entire trilogy, well, franchise now, and I wholeheartedly enjoy that sequence. And in a sense, this entire movie is kind of just one big CGI fun mess, because when the robots and all the technology is coming through, these creepy little bugs, I love the designs of these robots. They remind me of like little bugs and like just the way that they kind of all bring them to life was really incredible for me. But the thing that I really overall dug in this certain sequence is the way that when they were coming through and seeing just them in the mech suits blasting them, again, a fun CGI fun mess at that. Even adding in there, for me, what the big heart of this entire franchise has always been Neo and Trinity, and a lot of the hopefulness that they really much bring inside this movie is one of the biggest aspects of it, and one of the wholeheartedly graceful things of it. When they're flying up and they go above the clouds and you see the sun, it is kind of one of those big hopeful moments. And then of course right afterwards, spoilers if you haven't seen this movie for some reason, Trinity dies. It's very heartbreaking, but then it leads Neo into his finale, and again giving him that you know, if he couldn't save her, maybe he can save the rest of humanity. I like what this movie has to say, but when it comes down to The Matrix, I think a lot of people forget this, is that yes, the action is some of the best aspects of this entire franchise, but when we go back and look at that first movie, while I love all the action in there, the biggest standout for me in there is really much the world, the lore, the characters itself, and as well as the story being told, the concept. And in that first movie, it was executed so greatly, and I feel like every movie after that has some sort of issues when it comes down to the story developments that it's trying to tell. It's nothing that it's like, oh, I hated this, I didn't want it to go in this direction. It's just poor writing at times, and even in a sense, poor direction when it comes down to certain sequences. This entire movie really much is more action than story, making it entertaining, but at the same time, you really don't feel for much of what is going on. Overall, it's kind of exciting because I used to not really like this one growing up, but as time has gone on, I start to like this one a little bit more each time, even if it has tons of issues. And I feel like the reason I do is because we just don't get a lot of blockbusters now like this. And I honestly think, again, as messy as it can be, it's still fun. Which rounds me out to my number 3, and my number 3 in the Matrix franchise is the brand new film, The Matrix Resurrections. Now, I've only seen this movie twice as of this ranking, and I'm really excited to see it a third time, because when I first saw it, I left And I feel like I really needed it to see it a second time, so I encouraged myself and watched it a second time literally a day later. That way I could dive into The Matrix once again and really get my overall thoughts and bearings on this entire film. In a sense, the more and more that I've sat on this movie, the more that I like this one. Completely different than what they have done in the previous Matrix films, while at the same time still including the thematics that the original trilogy had and the messaging that it needed to be in there. The entire point of the Matrix is to wake the fuck up to certain instances in our lives, and for me, the resurrection is a part of that, bringing into life a new trilogy that could possibly be happening now. Based off my review, a lot of people are not digging this movie, and I understand that. For me, I find the first half of this film to be way better than the second half. And for me, I think the first half is actually perfect. The second half is where I get to that part where it's almost perfect, but it doesn't hit the nail on the head. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the first part is so damn well done. And the way that it really dives in and really pulls apart the meta complex of reboots and blockbusters today, and that is what I loved. And I know not everyone's gonna love that meta stuff, because it is actually really hilarious and at times can feel like a self-parody, but when it's the Matrix, that is something that I feel like would work in this film, and it does for me. Again, I understand it's not going to work for everyone out there. I actually think Lana Wachowski was very much on the nose with that entire concept. Maybe I'm completely wrong and thinking it in different ways, but the way that I view this movie is when we look at everything in it, it is very much stylized as, yes, one of the early blockbusters that we would have gotten in 1999 to the early 2000s, but adding in there, some of it is also created and made to be like a blockbuster nowadays. I think that is one of the big elements of this film that I feel worked, because it adds to the entire meta nature of it all. The action set pieces at times are filmed like early blockbusters from the 1999 or even the the early 2000s. And then sometimes it's filmed like today's blockbusters, and that's where it makes for some of the, mixed results, because I loved some of the action, I didn't love it all, but it's also biased and hits on the nostalgia a lot of when it comes down to the characters, maybe even some characters that were recasted for specific reasons to tie into the self-parody nature, but it's elements like that that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I think continues the legacy of The Matrix in a good way, and also in a refreshing way. It's different than what the original trilogy was, while at the same time still tying down the same messages and continuing the story from what we had last seen. It's a movie that the pros that I had for it grow on each time I think about the film, but my cons do sadly kind of go back just a hair. It's complex, it's sleek, it's meta. I still don't even feel like I understand every vast thing of this. It was great seeing Neo and Trinity back. I loved Abdul Mateen II and his portrayal of Morpheus. Jonathan Groff, I think, was actually pretty interesting in this, even if I wanted a little bit more of him, and especially Mateen II. But Jessica Henwick was one of the big standouts of Bugs in here. And again, I love these new characters, and I wanted more of them. It feels like the second half was very rushed in its nature of getting to the story, and in a sense brings to a very anticlimactic ending. While cool and visually styling, I wanted a little bit more from that back half to really dive into all the complex natures, because what does The Matrix mean to me? Everyone goes to The Matrix for different things. I go for it for the world. The action's just kind of the cherry on top of it all, and I liked what Resurrections was able to do with the world again, even if I wanted a little bit more exploration into it within the second half. Before we get to my number 2, guys, again, make sure to leave a comment on your guys' ranking. What is your ranking of all the Matrix movies? I'm so excited to hear your guys' thoughts on this one, because again, we are all going to have vastly different ideas and opinions, and that is completely fine. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Let's have a conversation about it down below, but I just really want to see your guys' ranking and have fun with that. And again, hit that like and subscribe button, because I love talking movies and I just want to bring the best movie community we can here. Coming down at my number 2 is The Matrix Reloaded. Growing up, I did not appreciate this movie for what it actually is, and rewatching it finally, probably after like 6 or 8 years, I really almost loved this movie. I was genuinely surprised that I almost loved this film, and it has absolutely grown on me in such a big time that I was genuinely surprised how much this had leveled up the world of The Matrix. First off, the action sequences in here, I honestly might argue, are better than the original Matrix film. And that's saying a lot, because the Matrix film, the first one, has some of the most iconic action. But this one, you get the sequence between Neo versus all the Smith clones, which is baffling, amazing, and again, one of the best action set pieces I think we've ever gotten. And then when you go to car chases, because car chases, I love good car chase, The Matrix Reloaded might have one of the best car chases ever put to screen. It's intense, it's enthralling, it's on the edge of your seat action. This is a movie that knows exactly what it needed to do. It went above and beyond, even if it was for its own good, and it really doubled down on everything that we had loved about The Matrix. You love the world? Well, here's more shit about the world that can be even more complex. You love the action? Well, here's a ton more action that really can be fucking cool and awesome all at the same time. Honestly, never appreciated the sequel for what it was, and this time around, I really fucking dug it. I find it to just be such a blast of an energetic time sitting down to watch this movie, and even though, again, this movie is not perfect, very much goes bigger, and sometimes that's to its own good and also to its worst enemy, because the story itself can be convoluted, way too complex, and honestly very dull in certain aspects that they add into the story that I just wasn't jiving with for a majority of the film. I can get for what they are going for, but I just sit there and I'm just like, okay, this is cool, but like, I'm not fully digging what they're trying to do. I do like some of the new characters they added, like the twins, the analyst, and of course the Oracle. All very interesting concepts that I think are held back from a script writing point. And sometimes it feels like the script maybe was a tad bit, needed a couple more rewrites to really dive into everything they wanted to touch on here. Because there is so much going on. And while this is the second longest Matrix movie, I feel like it needed a little bit more time to marinate. It explores the ideas and themes that the first one did, but again, doubling down on it in such a stronger way. I just really wish the story was a little bit more self-contained than what it was trying to go for, because the first movie, while complex, was very easy to understand and was written in a manner that worked. The Matrix Reloaded, no matter how many things I read up on this movie, there are still elements that I'm very confused on, and maybe I'm just stupid. Maybe I'm just stupid. But there are just certain things that I just feel like there's a little bit too much going on in this movie, and I actually wish some of it was saved for the third movie. That way, we could have gotten a little bit more story in that one. And that, though, The Matrix Reloaded is great, and I appreciate it way more than when I did when I was younger. And now, coming in at my number one, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys guessed it, it is the original Matrix movie. This is one of the best sci-fi blockbusters of all time. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. It changed the game when this film had come out. And I remember one of the first times my dad sat me down to watch this one, I was utterly blown away. Even if, for how young I was still pretty confused of what the hell was going on. I thoroughly loved this movie, and I still love it to this day. The 4K transfer is absolutely incredible, and again, when we talk about the entire world of The Matrix, they just don't make sci-fi blockbusters, or just in general blockbusters nowadays like this anymore. I love Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, and how awesome they are all together, but in general, the entire crew of the ship that Neo is a part of is so important. But the way that this movie starts and goes from each scene to sequence, it organically flows in such a way that it makes sense. Pretty much diving into this complex and fun concept that is at the same time dire, and actually makes us think about our real world, because there's tons of conspiracy theories out there that we are in a Matrix. It's very interesting to see how this film was able to dive into there, play around with that idea, but make it work in a smart, simple, and sleek way that never feels like it's too confusing for the audiences, too convoluted. It's just perfect. And even adding on top of that, and again, the thing that I've always mentioned is that when I come to a Matrix movie, it's for the world, it's for the characters. Yes, the action is there, and everyone's gonna have different. Some people come for the Matrix films for just the action. For me, it's always been about the story and the world of the Matrix, and that has always been some of the most interesting aspects, and the first movie did it so wonderfully. Keanu Reeves was perfectly casted as Neo, Carrie-Anne Moss is fucking amazing as Trinity, Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus, there's nothing more to say about that, and Hugo Weaving as Smith is just top-notch perfect. They're great through all three of the movies, but there's something just about this first movie that is just perfection for them all. You feel the stakes, you see it all, and every time they're diving into the Matrix and seeing Keanu Reeves kind of come up to be the person, the hero that they all need him to be, it is awesome, and it builds to such one of the best third acts in any blockbuster that has ever come to be. And the themes, the messages, the world, the way that the film is shot cinematography-wise is incredible, and the score is amazing. They just don't make blockbusters like this nowadays, and the first Matrix is a classic. It's one of my favorite films, and is absolutely still the best Matrix film. So that's gonna be my ranking of all the Matrix movies from worst to best. Make sure to leave a comment down below on what your ranking is. Again, hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. I had fun talking about this, and I can't wait to see your guys' ranking. Have a Merry Christmas, all of you guys, and of course, until next time, stay classy.